To order. And next is public comment on non-agenda items. So I was trying to figure out if what you gentlemen are going to talk about is on agenda or not. So you want to address, I didn't look, concern of expenses. I would think you kind of centered both of you on the master plan, right? And I don't exactly see master plan on here, so maybe we'll let you go now under non-agenda items. And then that way, if you want to hang around, you can, and if you don't, you can. How's that? Does it work for you?
Yeah,
So, Todd, we'll let you go first.
Sorry, Tony actually said he has a class to get to, so let's let you go.
Oh, you do? Well, then you should go first, and it's definitely non-agenda item. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a meeting.
Yes,
Yeah.
come right in.
Thank you. Can I just sit?
Yeah, well, if you want to, yeah, but look, let me roll this way a little bit. There you go, so everybody can see you.
My name is Tony. I'm a student representative of the Civilian Bond Oversight Committee. And I can't be here for long because I have a meeting, but I sent all the members of the committee an email on my questions because I noticed that there's some differences of the current plans that have been made and the original facilities master plan. So I just think that I hope to have answers for that so I could better carry out my work in the Citizens Bond Committee. That's why I emailed you guys, but I can just read my question out loud right now and hopefully have to recall. So the first one is, why are there notable deviations from the facilities master plan? For example, the Octagon Gym is in the FMP. What page is that on? The timeline isn't being followed, like the one with the W building, which is being scheduled for demolition, I think, next year, instead of 6 years, which I think was originally planned. The bond measure was also $565 million, which I think was laid out in the documents we were given in the Citizens Bond Committee. But it looks like the total expenses given in the latest documents of this meeting says that it's $530 million instead. So what is the difference of $330 million for? I'm not sure if it's a buffer or not, but I hope to have that clarified. The third question is, I've heard that no buildings on campus are red tagged. So what is the cost differential between retrofitting the W building and demolishing or replacing it with the orange academic building as seen in the facilities master plan? So I'm just hoping, like, would a question coming for that question, it could possibly be a much less expensive plan for that, instead of having the entire W building be replaced. Hopefully it's cheaper to just retrofit it and that's satisfactory. The fourth question is, W building demolition is included in measure PCC areas of spend, which is one of the documents. But why isn't the construction and design of the larger academic building in that plan as well? And how much will the construction be for constructing the academic building and the design of it? Because I'm not sure if it exceeds more than $33 million or not. But those are just my questions. So I appreciate you guys for listening to me. And hopefully, I hope that the email I sent out makes the questions even more clear. Because I'm pretty tired, so I'm just rambling on right now.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm reading time. You have 3 seconds.
Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
That's time.
Great, so thank you for your comments. I printed them out so that I actually have them. And you might want to come back when we get the master plan refresh,
All right, sounds good.
where this will actually be an agenda topic. But you know, the administration I think has copies of these now, right? Somebody there. So
Yeah, I'm not sure if these questions will be answered in this meeting, but I'll just be sure to check the live stream after this as well.
we won't answer them tonight for sure,
All right, thank
Because
you.
they're not on the agenda.
because they're not on the agenda. Right. So, okay, so thank you. Get to class and have a good night, everyone. Okay, so Todd, we'll let you roll next. And I brought my notes from your conversation, so I can follow.
Just so you know, when I raise my hand, it's 30 seconds.
That's pretty good. Okay. We're going to cut it close.
So my name is Todd Jones, I live in District 3 in Pasadena. Here's a flyer that I received about the PCC bond measure. As a voter and as a taxpayer, I'm very concerned about just what the $565 million is to be spent on. From the flyer, it says things like repair and replace, improve, remove hazardous materials, and this last one, retrofit older buildings to make them earthquake safe. Nowhere does it say even one word about building new buildings. But here we are talking about using bond measure money to pay for the Serafian building, the new STEM building, the new academic building, the new Galloway Plaza Cafe, the new student services facilities, the new pool and athletic facilities. The voters will see this and they will cry out, this is a scam. Maybe if a voter read the text of the bond measure itself here, they would see that the buildings, the new buildings being constructed were in there all along. But maybe they would feel tricked too. They might feel that this notice here is fraudulent. Also written in the text of the bond measure, the voter will find this very important paragraph. Proceeds from the sale of the bonds authorized by this proposition shall be used only for the acquisition, construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, replacement of district facilities, including the furnishings and equipping of facilities, and not for any purpose, including teacher or administrator salaries or pensions or other operating expenses. Yet, here we are. This is the presentation that will happen later, because it's been given on board notes. Here we are, and we're talking about $204 million going to staff augmentation. So the studious voter might also go and review just how much it costs to run various projects, let's say. So if you hire a company to run a building project, $50 to $100 million, they'll charge 2%. For architectural fees for building a building in the $100 million range, it's at most 5.5% for the most complicated buildings. So last bit here. So here today you'll have the assistant superintendent, vice president, and the executive director, chief facilities officer. They want to take 62% of the project cost for staff augmentation. The voters will surely think this is a scam. So just please find out what is the breakdown of the costs.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any others. Okay. So we're going to move to approval of the minutes September 19th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, comments? All in favor? Okay. Thank you. Measure PCC bond program overview.
Yes. All right, so at the request of the board, at our last Board of Trustees meeting, there was a request to kind of walk through the bond program as it relates to the facilities master plan, some of the nuts and bolts, the planning pieces, how it's structured, and then also a spending plan related to the measure. So this presentation is intended to address that request. I'll pause at every slide so we can kind of if we want to dig into questions, we have an opportunity to do that before we get to the end. So let's get started. All right. Okay. So Measure PCC approved by voters in 2022, $565 million general obligation bond. The 4 bullet points are a part of that 75 bond language. So as you all remember, in your folders is the full not only the 75 words that's mandated by the county to have a shortened version for the bond ballot, but then also the full measure that includes all of the project pieces that goes into supplemental ballot. So I pulled out the 75 point language just so that you see that, and then you have the full election details that went out to our voters in November or October when they came in their ballots. So Richard and I are both sort of overseeing the programming pieces of the bond measure, as well as then we now provide resources to the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So they first convened in August of this year. So you have to sell bonds in order for that committee to actually convene. Their role and responsibility is to review the actual expenditures and to compare that with the bond language. So they have a protocol to do that. It's a great kickoff meeting. We had representation from all of the districts, as well as then the 4 required by code for us to elect. So that piece, they'll meet again in December. We just sold our bond measure in July, so the first bond proceeds have been received by the district in early August, and so now is the time where we can start planning those pieces. And then the first piece that the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee in December will look at is some of those initial expenditures.
So I have a comment here. When the Citizens Bond Committee constituted, and this is the feedback that I received from one of the representatives from the Bond Committee, that they wanted, because they've served on the previous oversight committee, that they wanted to make sure that their colleagues on the committee understood that the purpose of the oversight committee is to oversee, not oversee, but to really look at if the college is spending using the expenditures the way that it says it is going to, that they're not there to provide feedback or planning for
The college,
yeah,
yes.
for the college. And he was a little bit concerned that that's where some of the committee members who may not have been on these committees before
Yeah.
are going. And so I would like to make a suggestion, if you don't mind, that the LACSTA, the LA County Trustees Association, had the chair of the Bond Oversight Committee statewide do a presentation on the role of the oversight committee. And we had talked about this maybe informally. I would like to formally request that at the next oversight committee, if that chair can be invited and maybe do a 30-minute to 45-minute
I
presentation.
can absolutely pass that on to Dr. Opel, who is the chair of that committee. So the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee is not a Pasadena City College either shared governance or governance operates outside of that. So I'd be happy to pass that on and the contact information. We're happy to schedule it for them, but I have to get formal approval from the chair of that committee to add that too.
And I also do want to see what exactly would be the role of the chair and the officers of that committee, so that, there is clarity, to your point, that
Yep.
they control the agenda. But I just want to make sure that we understand and the community understand what exactly their role is and what exactly authority does the chair and the officers have in that committee.
Yeah, yes and yes.
Okay, thank you.
So they have a bylaw, so I'll pass that bylaw on to all the board members. They actually asked for a bylaw change that we are bringing back to that group. They wanted to see a co-chair or a vice chair. So one of the bylaw pieces is for them to elect their chair of the CBOC, which they did. They also then requested a change of their bylaws to represent a vice chair, which they will approve at their December 5th meeting. So I'm happy to pass on their bylaws and any feedback on that piece as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, seems we're off on this tangent. When I was board chair in the old Measure P oversight, we made sure we actually had the ballot, like the actual ballot statement
Yeah.
present at every meeting for every member, not like in a pile in the middle, but, you know, name tag.
Yes.
This is what you're monitoring.
Yes, so they all were prepared with, we prepared folders for each of them that gave them contact information of their committee representatives, all of the bond language, the presentations that had been done at the board meetings leading up to that point. So they have a full-on binder with their names
Yeah.
and everything.
And,
So
okay.
that they
and
have it at every
every meeting,
CPOC meeting.
that
is
language
correct.
kind of sat right next to
Yes,
their
front
name,
and
so
center,
they could
yes.
be
Yes,
subliminally
yes, yes, sir.
All right,
But
so we
great
were
suggestions,
on
and I'm
to
happy
upgrade
to-
aging labs, I think, or something like that.
I don't know, with fear.
Okay,
All right, so the facility strategic plan, so there's a framework and a vision, you know, related to that. The FMP is really intended to focus on looking at our existing campus facilities with really the goal and intention of creating the best facilities needed for our students to, at that time, our big tagline was dream come do,
Hey.
right, yay. And then the vision of that is to define and do some assessment of existing facilities, improvements at each of PCC's location. The bond, I always sort of have the FMP with me on page 14. So the way that these fit into is HGA then, there's a ton, there's like 300 pages, right, of this. So they sort of encapsulated what the college's priorities are on page 14. I'll read them really quickly, that their recommendations. So the priority projects for PCC based on the review of available data is a new natural sciences and health sciences laboratory. So that's the building that's being discussed as east of Serafian. We haven't given it a name yet, but that's the location. A new student center and student life nexus, coupled with a consolidated and expanded student services center, so one stop. So that's the conversation around the new student services building, those 2 bullet points. Expanding Rosemead and exploring purchase opportunities. I wonder what that could actually refer to. So that helps to address some of that satellite conversation in terms of campuses. Improve Colorado frontage to strengthen the college identity. A lot of those pieces get weaved up into our centennial planning, particularly around our mirror pools. Create a new reforce site circulations to some infrastructure projects, and prioritize demolition and replacement projects. So those are the priorities that are listed in the facilities master plan that HGA shared with us. So that's sort of the framework. So the framework and the vision fits into sort of then looking at how we can execute on the priorities that were laid out in the FMP.
I just want to, this is a very small thing, I just want to be sure that folks know that when we say facility strategic plan, that's
Yes.
the same thing, but
Yes,
we
I've
wanna
been
use-
trying
we
to,
want to use current language is why
We-
that's, okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for the
Oh,
good
no,
catch.
no.
So we're moving away for, so just to sort of address what Trustee Wayne is referring to, we're moving away from the terminology around master planning and things like that. So we started to replace, so while we may say FMP because that's what the document was formally approved at, we're starting to use the language around facility strategic plan or our educational strategic plans and things of that, or technology strategic plans instead of using that language. So appreciate you bringing that up. All right, so roles and responsibilities. This is a goal for us. Yeah, let me use this. The mouse is not working. It's not my friend. It's not my friend. So there's a key real role that our facilities and construction services area plays for the college, largely due to not only their experience in construction and planning pieces. So I kind of want to walk through that, which then fits into these other sort of shared governance pieces that kind of helps us understand how we go about assessing needs and priorities for the college. So there's a planning piece that planning and operational recommendations around what is happening on campus, the things that get escalated based on this building is having this challenge, this classroom needs the X sort of things, all come funnel through facilities and construction service. Largely because they have the ticketing system, they're managing projects, scheduled maintenance on this campus. So they'll generate all the recommendations. Those go immediately to, in our bonds program, because I want to start using that language because now we have dollars to actually formalize the planning pieces around that. Go to our bond user work group. And that group is actually the facility standing committee of College Council. So there are representatives from our faculty, there are representatives from associated students, a management association, classified, and a host of college personnel who help to provide guidance or information about whatever is being discussed. And so that meeting convenes, it used to convene once a month, now it convenes bi-weekly. And so that team throughout last year and this year gets facilities related sort of questions, conversations and things, gets back and feedback back from their constituent groups, formalizes that based on that particular group, that rolls up to College Council. Depending on what it is, it could come to the facilities standing committee, or facilities board subcommittee, and then the board of trustees. It just sort of, you know, we may not bring furniture related issues to this meeting, right? I mean, but that group sees a host of different facilities area, but they're gonna start to shape and really provide sort of the funnel around the bonds program. And then facilities, so facilities is there in great numbers. Then there's the execution of Measure PCC, our capital outlay, and our scheduled maintenance. Because remember, we have different sort of funding sources that guide a lot of different facilities projects on campus. We receive state funding to help with scheduled maintenance. We have capital outlay funds that are used for equipment and other facilities purchases. And then we also have our Measure PCC. And so all of that is sort of bound together in under the oversight of facilities and construction services and business and administrative services. So they'll do like the vendor selections. So when we have a project, they do the job walks. If it's an RFP, they'll do the ranking along with our colleagues in purchasing, business services. Depending on the project, we can invite others to participate in those ranking activities. They're scored by members and the teams, and then depending on, again, the project, different constituents are invited to participate in those RFP processes. So they do that, and then once the project is kicked off, then they oversee all of the project supervision, the reporting responsibility. So a great example of that would be this meeting. We bring the monthly Serafian report here. We have our colleagues at Kitchell that help to provide guidance on what's happening on that building. And so they're also responsible for making sure that the work is happening and then how we're then informing the community about that work. There are monthly reports prepared for the bond user group. Those reports will also be shared with our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee on the websites. We're working on getting that all updated and out there. They come here at the Board Facilities Subcommittee, so we'll do a Serafian construction update as well. And then depending on what it is, it may come to the Board of Trustees based on your recommendations. Hey, this is something we'd like our other colleagues to see, and we take that from you all. We also have, so the Standing Committee now meets bi-weekly. They've been meeting through September, October. We have building user groups for not only the Serafian building itself, so there are faculty and staff who will eventually go into the Serafian, who are serving as a user group to help with questions about, we recently did a confirmation of all the room names and the numbers, right? They'll give us feedback on furniture, fixtures, and equipment that's needed for that building. So we have nurses who are going to be doing that work, or folks who are in our student health services area that participate. So the people who are going to be in that building are on that user group. So we have one for Serafian. We will start one for the Miracle projects because we want to make sure that the community, so we've asked our shared governance partners to solicit and give us representation from faculty, management, associated students, and classified to participate in that activity. And they will start meeting monthly on the Miracle project. So those are the two largest ones. Very soon thereafter, in 2024, we're gonna be starting the design work for the new buildings. So we'll get into that as we talk about so that's their role, but let me pause and see, yes?
So in terms of implementation, maybe it's from like the earlier priorities that are laid out in that plan, but do you have a certain timeline of, okay, we're gonna do the W building demolition, we're gonna do the mayor pools, like how would you say that you map out which one you wanna do next?
Good question. So a lot of it will be based on facilities and construction services knowledge of like things like there are some infrastructure pieces that tie things together. Here's a great example. Serafian building is currently coming online, right? They're in construction. They're building this power distribution center that helps to bring power to that portion of the campus. So the question then becomes, okay, wait, we're doing a lot of work on the east side of campus. Instead of disrupting other areas of campus, why wouldn't we bring in some of the seismic retrofit of the E building in this phase, right? Because we already have contractors, we're already doing work in that area. So then they bring the recommendation. It makes more sense for us to bundle that work as a part of the Serafian and the new building that'll go to east of Serafian than to say, oh no, we're gonna wait till 2029 to come back to the E building. You know what I mean? So they do sort of like this jigsaw puzzle piece based on the infrastructure pieces that are happening so that they can make sure, one, we're describing what work can happen in parallel, and so like we can kind of double dip, that might be a good term, you know, do the infrastructure for all of those pieces at one time rather than coming back. The second piece is, you know, where can we also have the least impact? I mean, this is going to be a very busy construction, sort of heavy environment in terms of all of this work that needs to happen, and so they're trying to be thoughtful through what makes sense in terms of room scheduling. How do we move folks from one area? Where are we going to have swing space? So all of those pieces sort of get laid out. And then they think through, we work with our construction partners to kind of help conceive those pieces, and then those are the pieces that move forward as recommendations to say, well, what are we forgetting here, right? Because it isn't a point, I don't want to get into with a structural engineer, I don't have the capability to say, or the experience to say, no, really we shouldn't do the electrical engineering piece of the east side of campus. The question that we're asking the community to say was, well, what's the impact? You know, what do we need? What are we forgetting? What do we want to make sure that we're taking care of while this piece is going on in this particular area of the college? Does that answer? Okay.
Language clarification.
Yes.
So bond user group is specifically for, let's say, when you said Serafian's coming online, people who are inhabiting Serafian, they're part of a bond user group. The bond work group is the same thing as the facilities stand committee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so then how does shared, I sort of led into this with shared governance. So our piece is around making sure that we're consulting collegially, right? We want to make sure, hey, right, how, I want to come to associated students and say, hey, here's what we're thinking about, here are the reasons why, what are we forgetting, what are, you know, I know we often get from our different areas, well, I don't have the expertise to say whether or not the power distribution center should come first, second, or third. We often get that feedback from any one of those groups. And we kind of say, we don't want to speak for everybody. We kind of want to better understand like what the recommendations are and for why, for what reasons. So we do that, and then they help us then inform to say, okay, again, we haven't thought about, maybe there's an election piece in AS that's around this particular time that they want us to be sensitive to. Great. Then we sort of adjust to make sure like we've accounted for that concern within the larger decision-making piece. So the goal is really to make sure that the constituents who are impacted and are affected have an opportunity to give us that feedback and for us to then provide solutions to that feedback.
And my comment here would be that there is a difference between decision-making process and making the decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when and shared governance is a topic that the board, has discussed with our consultant Bryce Harris, and what's been shared with us is that shared governance is defined in so many ways by very different groups. And so when we talk about participatory governance where there is feedback, that is certainly one side of it, and then it comes to the decision making. So I want to just be very clear, because I think sometimes it gets confused as to who gets to make that decision. And so when we talk about supervising and implementing and planning, at what various stages do certain constituents get to make decisions? And I would think that ultimately, as a board or fiduciary responsibility, is the decision making of what happens, with this bond. And again, I want to make that, to have that clarity.
I would say that's probably something, so the training that I agree that there is a different viewpoint about decision-making in a shared governance context. I agree. I would say that each of our shared governance groups probably have a different idea about what that means. And so the recommendation that, or advice I would give is, if we all want to get on the same page about what that is, we may want to think through how we express that. So Academic Senate has a vision of what they believe
Sure.
consult
And they have a role in that. Right?
Correct. They sort of, in their minds, have what that, I want to make sure that those pieces don't conflict with the way that Classified Senate believes that is, or
Right.
Management Association, or even the board, right? So it's all, everybody has to be on the same page about what that means. So I
Yes.
completely agree.
And ultimately, the board has to weigh the various different positions of each of the stakeholders for us to make that decision.
Is that a question?
No,
for-
it's a rhetorical,
Okay.
it's a rhetorical question, but again, as we go through this process,
Yeah,
what I would like to have a better understanding or clarification is, where are the decision-making
yeah, points.
Because I think sometimes that gets mixed in,
It does.
and then it could add to certain confusion or miscommunication, and especially with this bond program. That's all.
No, and I think we could think through what that looks like, going forward. I think so, for sure. All right, so we talked about the bond work group. So this is their actual charge that is under their charter, that they advise College Council on all matters related to the development and implementation of our facilities strategic plan. This comes straight from their language, so that's why it's still the old language, and other facilities related projects in support of our educational strategic plans and the college's mission. So this group has representation from all of our areas as well as executive leadership.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So, let's say the bond music group is considering, as, let's Seraphian, for example. So they're providing input to Seraphian. So that goes to the bond work group, and then from the bond work group to college council, and then from college council.
It depends. So it depends on what it is,
Okay.
because college council kind of extends some level of if all of the constituents in that group have agreed and there's nothing that has come up, they tend to sort of like, everybody had a say, yes, and then they'll, you know what I mean?
Represented, yeah.
Yeah, because everyone's represented. Now, there are times, I wouldn't say anything recently, but there have been times on other topics where constituents groups may have a differing opinion about something, and that'll come up at college council. Whether it's on policy, usually I see a lot of policy-related pieces, APs, BPs, they may have differing opinions. And then if so, they're asked to go back and try to resolve those pieces before, so that there isn't a split vote. So we've had that a couple of times, I'd say, in my tenure here. It's not often,
Yeah.
so here's the positive. It's not often that they get into differing pieces, but when it does happen, the request, kind of like a jury, go back into the jury room. You know,
Deliberate.
yes, we're gonna give you the same instructions, we just believe in you. We believe in you, so go on back and try to resolve it. And then, I haven't seen something not come out resolved, but it may take sending folks back a couple of times to the jury deliberation room to come up with language or something that gets them all on the same page.
That makes sense. And, of course, since, we just got the first proceeds from the bond, we haven't broken ground on anything bond related yet, well, does that
Small
make sense?
things.
Yeah. But to Trustee Chen Lau's question, so really it's, at least on campus internally, the bond work group is where some of those decisions are being made before things come to this body. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I thought we'd go procurement, start there, because I think it's, again, important how these things come to you all, right? So, none of the bond work can be executed without first an authorization from the board to bid something, right? You've had a couple of those in our past meetings. There's one we'll talk about later today that you'll see in our November meeting. But so first, there has to be an expression, like this is a particular portion of the project that we want to bid out. And then you all say, or ask questions, okay, and then it goes into the second part, which is a formal RFP process that is driven through our purchasing area. They host job walks and answer questions of anybody who's considering bidding on the process. Darlene and Deb, who's our Executive Director over Business Services, her team oversees those pieces. So it talks about all those RFP that come in. So that's sort of the formal bid process. I wanted to insert number 3, just as a reminder. Remember, we approved 2 additional construction delivery methods, both design, build, and lease back, that allow the district to consider additional criteria, because remember that traditional delivery model allows for the district only to consider lowest responsive bid, right? So it's based on the dollars that not any sort of specialized skill, not something else, but it's just whoever submits, whoever provides all of the documentation has the lowest responsive bid.
And to your point, Candace, I appreciate the way that this is laid out, right? I think it's very clear. But to your point on the request for proposal, the board has discussed, I believe, numerous times that while we understand that there's some legalities around whether there can be DEI integrated with a request for proposal, that somehow there could be a statement that we would ask the vendors to provide if they have one on DEI, because when one of the points that we made when we did this bond campaign was to communicate and convey with their communities that, one, that this would generate economic activity in the region locally, that we would hire local vendors, right, that we would promote local jobs, all that. And so as this may not be here, but I want to just put that bug in the ears of your staff, that this is something that we have been committed to, not just for this bond, but for other vendors that we had discussed as well.
And then, so thank you. And then that last piece is that award piece, right? There's the contract, government code, public contract code, ed code that governs our award process. In that traditional method, bids are awarded to the lowest responsive bidder, and RFPs to propose whatever provides the best value to the district. That's how that traditional model works.
The
Alternate delivery methods allows us to consider other pieces, other specialized skills, other things that we can add to it. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that's it.
I was looking at this, but I was saying yes to you.
This is helpful. I just want to clarify on the business section of our agendas in terms of the authorization. So there's clearly a board vote, potentially input, which when we vote on it in our agenda for the authorization piece. But pretty much once authorization is given to begin the project, it's a little bit out of our hands, right?
Well, I would say this piece and this piece, remember, so the delivery method and the
Right.
authorization
have that
all
written.
kind of bundled together. And so we had made a commitment that when we were going to consider delivery, remember we would give
Right.
both an assessment of the traditional model, the alternate model, so that the board had greater guidance or information related to when those methods actually will really benefit us. So I would say those two pieces, there are inputs in both of those areas, and then the final awarding piece
Right.
of awarding the contract.
But when it comes to awarding the contract, so, for example, for the lowest responsive bidder, we are ratifying that mostly, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what, because what kind of
You
input?
can always choose not to award a
That is true,
contract.
okay. I'm just, that is
That is your
that is
purview.
that is the yes or
Yeah.
no question, okay.
That is the board's purview. Thank you. You're welcome.
And do we see oftentimes that when the lowest bid is awarded, then they come back with change orders that increase? And so, do you see what I'm saying? So
We do, which is why I think those delivery methods might be very beneficial.
Okay.
One of which we're trying, you all authorized on the power distribution, lease back. So that's a really great case study for us to see like, okay, so based on this new model, let's assess that, provide some information. That might be a great model to come back to this group to just say, this is how that went. I think we're also considering a design build for like a smaller project like a Galloway Plaza, something like that. So again, we can sort of test these methodologies and then compare that against the change orders and things that we're seeing in that traditional method.
And so, and I'm going ahead because I'm looking at the next page.
You want to go to the next
No,
one?
But the way that I'm thinking about this is that, at the end of this campaign, right, at the end of the $565 million spend, what I would like to see and what I hope we can articulate is that $300 million were awarded to local vendors, that we generated X amount of economic activity through this, that we were able to create X amount of jobs because we did this. So
That's good that you're saying that now, because I think we can build into a sort of a reporting mechanism about how to capture that along the way.
right,
Because remember, this is like a 10-year,
exactly.
15-year
So,
plan, but I
yes.
like that you're saying that right now, because I think we can think through how we build in the structure for reporting that kind of information over the long term.
And I am being even a little bit more ambitious now that you've given me permission.
Uh-oh.
Is that, because the district is 7 districts,
Mhm.
it will be really good to see, how it's impacting each of our districts, if that
Okay.
is possible.
I might
right?
pick your brain about how we could potentially do that. I want to better understand
Yes.
what you're meaning by that, but let's,
Because this way, it allows us to say to the taxpayers in our
Mhm.
districts who is really funding this, that this is your return on your dollar to, District 1, whatever that is. It may not be possible, but I
Sure.
just want to be able to.
let's touch base on just
put that
ideas
out there.
about like how we would measure something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay, great.
Because I think again, with all projects, it's better if we do this early enough, you
Yes.
set the structure in place to capture all that data. Oftentimes, I think with projects, whether it be IT projects, I'll pick on my IT folks, whether it be, you get after the, and then they're like, was this successful? And you're like, well, it's done. That's not the
Exactly.
only measure of success in something that we're doing, but having these good conversations upfront, I think will be really helpful for us to build into the framework about how to capture this data.
Great, Thank you.
You're welcome.
At least actually, in terms, I like that idea in terms of at least in the pieces that Trustee Shannon mentioned, in terms of the impact on the economy and how we spent these dollars. That will be helpful because I'm also thinking the reality of our very ambitious facility strategic plan is that it might cost more than the amount of money we're going to be getting right now, and recognizing that we would in the future like to have potentially future another bond.
Yeah.
And so showing the return to our community members will, I think, help sell a future.
The work that's described in our facility strategic plan, formerly known as FD,
Yeah.
it's like Prince, right? Formerly known as Prince. The estimates that were given now 3 years ago, far exceeded the bond measure that we went out
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
We went out for a bond measure that, after the feedback from the community about what they believed they could absorb within their taxes, this is right. So we did a lot of campaigning,
Right.
surveying. That's what drove that number. It wasn't what's the work described here that drove the number.
Because that would have been 700 or 800
Billion.
million, yeah.
I heard that at one point. I was like, I'm not trying to
Keep this moving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so then you all asked, so Trustee Chinmao at our last meeting said, hey, I really would like to better understand like what the spending plan would look like, what are the buckets, and so this is an attempt to kind of, at a high level, give you some idea of where spending happens in these different categories. There's just a ton of things that are not on this. I tried to pull out the largest items and really speak to project management, design, construction, demolition, infrastructure, and small projects. So the term staff augmentation is not district staff. So to be clear, these are professionals that come in. These could be construction professionals. We have a colleague in the room who falls into these categories. We do not have the staffing numbers in our facilities and construction
Building
services.
inspectors.
You're right, to do the work that's necessary.
Architects.
For architects, and the DSA inspectors, engineers that are gonna come in and supplement our staff in order to cover all of these projects.
And I think this is a good beginning to define what that means.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe the word staff can be misinterpreted as district staff, but when you lay that out, that is professionals, if there is a list that we keep as a cheat sheet
Okay,
of, what that entails,
sure,
that will be helpful for us.
got
So I'm gonna give my one big comment right here and now, because I realize this is our high level first time around. I don't know if I'm the only one that went to Measure P oversight on these, and
Probably.
I don't know if there's anybody left on the.
Did you go to Measure A as well?
No, just the original 150 million. And the way that I really appreciated that I'm hoping that we would move to, the way the layout was presented, was there's a high-level page that showed each project and the approximate dollar award of each of those projects on the list. Then the next level down in the backup was a breakdown for each project,
it.
which is defined a little bit more in the general construction categories of maybe entitlement, design, construction, furniture, contingency. And the total of all those categories, and maybe I missed one, but the total of all those categories summed up to the total on the summary, obviously.
Yes.
And that layout, and then that layout in the book that was presented to the Bond Oversight Committee each meeting showed how much had been spent in each of those general categories in each of those projects. And obviously, as projects move forward and there's changes.
Mhm.
Because a plan is something that you design to change. So, you know, sometimes there were major changes, and part of that packet was what we're about to see on a page or two. It was a rough timeline, as you would
Mhm.
normally see it with a
Mhm.
start here, end here, general bar chart for each project, and
Mhm.
how that was doing. So, I think when you start to see not 267 million in construction, but when you start to see
Each of those
80 million
projects.
for the Armin Serafian building over this timeline,
Mhm.
turn a page and see how it's broken down, or the next project, or the electrical infrastructure, or whatever you parse those major projects out. And then that also gives you a reference for as costs increase, where, from whence does it come?
Mhm.
Are
Mhm.
we gonna eliminate a project? Are we gonna, you know?
Mhm.
So I would hope, because I haven't ever impressed in my mind, I don't know if I could go through old files and find it, that that would be the preferred layout for the oversight committee and certainly for the board.
Sure.
I also am one whose major concern, and though I appreciate local and I appreciate a lot of these things, I realize as soon as we start putting in special conditions for local, other districts put in special conditions for local, which means companies that may reside in our district that might be getting work in neighboring districts may not be so inclined to get it. So rather than get into a trade war dispute with other local districts, or rather than even, I'm concerned with maximizing how much of these projects we can accomplish with the amount of money that we have, because though it's very significant as expressed, the list is long.
Mhm.
And I think when we start just seeing high level, the amounts going to the very many projects that were outlined, plus, as mentioned, it also allows the bond oversight committee in seeing those projects to get the first pass on that these projects were validated within the context of the bond,
Mhm.
of the bond purpose. So that would be my one request. It's a
I would
big
add
one.
it in. No,
And
it's
it's a
not
big-
a big
but
one.
it's an important.
It's one that we're planning for.
Yeah.
The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee needs to see the cost. That is their role, The additional piece that we've added to what you described is the actual language and the bond language to like, this line ties to this piece in our ballot language. So it's an easy reference for them. They don't have to hunt and peck through the 20 pages in the sample ballot language that we've also taken the accept, and this is where it is in this bond language. You can verify.
So as a specific example, because this bond, not in the actual 75 words, but in the context of the full ballot presentation,
Yep.
mentions the Rosemead
Satellite
or
images.
offsite
Mhm.
satellites. I, for one, am waiting to see just the first ballpark number that's set aside for a satellite campus, realizing that that number is obviously going to fluctuate. I'm hoping that initially it's a little higher number for which we won't need it all and can
Mhm.
shove some additional funds
Other things.
into other things,
Mhm.
because just hypothetically 1/7 of, $565 million is probably significantly more than what I hope is needed for a Rosemead campus, but in some ways, if you just think in terms of proration, it's a nice start. Okay, so those are my
Just really
comments.
quickly, and I appreciate what Trustee Martin had said here, the only piece that I would personally disagree with a little bit, and of course this is probably a broader conversation for all our colleagues as well, is I think there is an importance of us reinvesting dollars that our community has entrusted to us back into the community that gave us those funds. And so I think on that piece, although I think it always has to be a decision based on what's best for each project, and if there are reasons, as there are going to be reasons that we're given whenever we decide on a delivery method or things like that, and within the delivery method is also, I know there's a bunch of factors that we can consider in selecting, but I do think, those well-founded considerations aside, I think reinvesting those dollars into our community that trusts us with this money is going to be really important, particularly if we want to continue having these kind of programs into the future. But that's just one.
These are concepts, and we don't obviously
Right. It's
debate
a
now, but
broader conversation.
yeah. But I would make the same argument in the long run that you might be hurting dollars that could come to local districts from other neighboring districts if we were putting up barriers. But great concepts either way. Okay, so we kind of cruised right through the
So those are my expense categories.
yeah.
The 533 million is based on after we pay off their costs related to the bond, right? In terms of like our underwriters and things, Serafian building, also we had a COP payment. So that's why that 565 goes down to 533. That's the available project budget or project funds that are available. It's because we're getting rid of the costs for the bond payment for our partners who help with the underwriting and things like that, and then the Serafian.
So I would suggest back on my envision design, on
Have
the
that
summary
there.
page, there would be a category
Of
for
overhead. whatever
overhead,
the-
initial overhead of the entire project.
Yep. Totally fine, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's important to emphasize though that the bulk of that money is, it is going to a project, it's just going to a project that is already under construction. So I think that's right.
Correct. Yeah.
30 million
It's like
was,
27 million, but
27
yeah, we
was
said
a
there's.
COP.
Yeah.
the other benefit of the way I proposed this is, I think it will show clarity, because when you start to see entitlement, and you understand it's not really people, but entitlement
Yeah.
and design
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
or construction management,
Yeah.
inspection, TSA.
yeah.
You realize we're not talking about you, or you, or,
Yes, agreed. All right, so we continue on. So this is just, we presented this at our June board meeting. This is a schedule that we have for our Measure PCC drawdown or when we'll sell bonds. So we did so in July, received funding in August. We've got Series B planned for 2025. It's on a 2-year increment. Now, at any point, if we need additional project funds, we can go and sell bonds early, later, let's say, because remember, each series that we draw down, we have to have 85% of those funds expended within 3 years. So it's a real tight planning process. I mean, there are legal implications for us drawing down too much money and then not being able to spend it within the 3 years. And certainly implications if we get too little of money, and now we have bills that need to be paid that can't be paid. So this is sort of the strategy that we've laid out based on projects that we anticipate, and it's about on a 2-year cycle. And then last, sort of, again, just giving you sort of timeline, what's happening. So anytime with a bond program, it takes us a little time to get the program up and running. So I appreciate Trustee Martin's experience on Measure P. I think that's helpful for us. We just received our funding in August, and so this early portion of the planning process is really around planning, small projects that get sort of funded. Like, what are some low-hanging fruit that we can kind of easily get through and help the campus? But design and demolition between 2023 and 24, getting into 25 through 29, where you'll see those major construction contracts. I don't know often as you guys are seeing that things like, oh, there's $50 million, there's $80 million. That's going to happen right around that 2026 kind of timeline. That's when we'll have approved designs that we've gone through the campus community that have come to the board for approval, that we've gone through our DSA submittals, and that we're able to say, okay, go build, right? So that's about the timeline that we're anticipating. There's a lot of legwork that happens before we can just start building a building.
And and that's why I think this is really important,
Yeah.
because the more information that we have on the front end,
Yeah.
and the more that we lay out what our expectations are,
Mhm.
and the concepts and preferences now, then it leads to, I think, a better outcome
Really successful
And-
projects, yeah.
and less misunderstandings for these projects.
All right.
Okay, that took an hour of our meeting, and we are now on Serafian Building.
So you all have a handout in your booklets that we can, Chris is here to kind of just walk you through some of the updates on Serafian.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the Serafian building. Now I know the format, we can provide probably better pictures, but just to give you a brief overview, the project is now approximately 65% complete. Inside the black screen, if you walk past the Serafian building, you'll just see the big black box as such, but inside there we've got 100 workers averaging daily. So, in your question to local businesses, I know Chick-fil-A is certainly benefits of 100 workers. And again, if you go into parking lot 5 down in the basement, that's where everyone parks for the construction, and we can get up through the tunnel. So I just want to bring that concept through, because you really, on campus, you don't see much of the activity as such, but with 100 workers in there, there's really a lot going on, you know. And again, for this format, we thought it would be good just to give you it level by level, so you'll see the changes. So level 1, we've got the drywall second side going on. That means basically all the utilities are installed inside the walls, insulation's installed, and then we can be drywall on both sides. Level 2 is just slightly ahead of that. That's mostly at 80% now is drywall. And you'll see that picture on the left-hand side. That's now you can see the classrooms and the lecture rooms forming with the windows to the corridors. So it's really starting to shape up a lot. Level 3, the MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing roughing. They're all going into the walls right now, and you'll see that on the right-hand side. So that's about 85% complete for the MEP roughing. That'll be followed by insulation in the drywall second side. And level 4 it gets less, interior framing complete with MEP roughing in progress. And level 5 is about 95% with the interior walls getting all framed out. On the exterior envelope, all the water barrier installation is 95% complete. We started flashing around all the window openings for the curtain wall and the storefronts that we have around this building. The Serafian's got a lot of glazing, especially on the west elevation, so you're going to get a lot of natural light into that side. The exterior envelope, the panels as such, is a system called EFIS. It's an exterior insulated finish system that goes on. So it prevents you having to provide insulation from the inside, but you're really getting it from the outside envelope. We have had some design issues with that right now, but we think we've conquered them. So we're hoping to put all the materials on site, so it's just a matter of getting it started next week and get it moving, try to get the building watertight. For site works, again, final portion of underground fire water, domestic water. And to piggyback a little bit what Candice was saying about looking at the picture overall, we brought in new water from Bonnie Avenue that will serve whatever building ends up next to Serafian. So we brought that service in, we sized the gas, the water, to accommodate both those buildings. And we also accommodated, knowing that the health science building would go into construction, we left a kind of buffer zone between the Serafian that we thought would be occupied when the new building goes on. So there's all that kind of thought process that's going on right now. Just moving down into schedule. The September schedule update that we got from the contractor reflects the completion date of October 1, 2024. I think Richard reported last month on this one that the contractor did submit a revised time impact evaluation that pushed the substantial completion date out from the April date to the October. This time impact evaluation addressed design changes and prolonged ship times for HVAC and electrical equipment. Originally the baseline schedule had the electrical equipment being energized or arriving on site in August, which has passed, and they haven't been able to procure the equipment until, well, they've been given a date of January 19, 2024. So with that impact, they can't energize the building to do testing and everything else of the system, so it does have a real knock-on effect right now. The TIE has been returned to the contractor as rejected, because we saw a lot of concurrent delays, but we foresee a resubmittal. We'd written this a few days ago, but we foresee a resubmittal addressing impact design items to the exterior envelope, and we actually got a resubmittal at 4 o'clock this afternoon, so we need to review that and see where we stand with all that. On to the second page. I just summarised again the electrical transformer switchgear, because that has been one of the biggest contentions of the building so far. And then upcoming activities through fall 2023. Completion of the exterior envelope to watertight the building, completion of the drywall to all interior walls, and we actually had the lab fume hoods arrive today for the chemistry on the 5th floor, so that's all these labs are heavily equipped with all the fume hoods and all the utilities that would go with that. They're of a size where you can't get them through a normal door, so it's not like you can just go ahead, form all the rooms, and then bring all this equipment in afterwards. So the fume hoods have to arrive, be positioned, and then we can finish up closing up the walls and installing the door frames and everything else. So there's a lot of movement going on and a lot of thought process there. And if you are on site tomorrow, we've got a crane arriving. They'll be lifting up more rooftop equipment onto the roof. And also through the fall 2023, we have elevator installation ongoing. And again, just to piggyback the thought process of when Seraphian does complete, that will empty out Science Village. And then that's why the thought of building E, people that use labs can then go into the Science Village. So that whole implementation is like kind of a step-by-step process. So as people move out, swing space is getting thought for other users so they can vacate a building. So there's a whole series of measures that go into these decisions. So that's really what I've got for Seraphian. If you've got any questions?
Yeah, I think this is helpful, very helpful, and it's great to see obviously progress despite the one delay that we know about already. Substantial completion in October 24. I'm assuming that means that, this might be for anybody, programming wouldn't begin until the following academic year.
Spring of 25.
Spring of 25, so it's actually pretty
That's our
pretty
soft,
tight
yeah,
window.
we're hopeful that we'd be able to make spring 25. If it pushes any further, I think when we get into early January 2024, that will help us understand whether we'll be able to make spring or whether it would be fall of 25. I think the equipment, some of these delays, they're supposed to happen in early January,
Early
February.
January, but until they show up, we never really
We never know.
That's when we'll be able to make the call on whether it's spring 25 or fall 25, or summer.
Yeah, and then in terms of, these are, I mean, obviously these things that are being delayed is a massive, it's a big piece of having a functioning building, but are there other things that could potentially be delayed that we would?
At this stage, I don't think so. We've ironed out a lot of the design issues that were there on site, so, I mean, there's always something comes up, so I'm never going to, construction's just,
Right,
it's easy to draw it on a piece of paper and with all the modelling, you think you've catered for everything, but, I mean, things do happen out there, but I personally believe we're over the biggest of the hurdles right now, and now it's plain sailing, just to try and bring the building home.
Thank you.
I'm curious, and I don't know that you can rattle this answer off the top of your head, or you can as candidate, about how much was set aside for contingency for this building, and of that, how much have we spent?
So with the state, there was a 10% contingency within the funding from the state. That wasn't always a complete 100% state funding, but there was a 10% contingency. Right now we've, well actually I've changed order number 5 here, which takes us to 1.75% of that 10%. So once this gets processed, then you'll be at 1.75%.
Of the total award,
From the state.
of the total sort of
Contingency.
contingency.
Oh.
Mhm.
Oh, did you know?
That was lucky.
That's really, no, that's
It's
really
really good.
terrific. You know, thank you so much for this detail
That's our
and for the updates. I mean, and usually it's hard to answer, Trustee Martin's question. And the fact that you did,
With that
you should just
spreadsheet
adjourn
anyway.
the meeting right now.
And, you know, to be this far along and have that much left, you're kind of like, we're not saying in public or anything, but,
I think we're gonna use all, I mean.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I think we're gonna get
oh,
it.
okay.
But terrific job, thank you so
No,
much,
thank you.
that's
Appreciate it.
really terrific.
Now, there are a host of different projects, so if you wanna take a moment and see,
Yeah,
I don't know if
think
we're
it's
gonna go through all of
Yeah,
them.
we're a little
But I
late.
do
It's up to
have
you.
one comment.
Please.
So when we do the, is the C building gonna be renovated or?
So that is in the strategic plan, both C and R are scheduled for modernization.
The only reason I ask is because, you know, when the Jack Scott building, and the PCC, it's just the wording and does it match any of the rest of the colleges, in terms of, does it look uniform? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's one of the pieces that Chris, Richard and I are working towards along with our SCAM part. It's really standards around, so with Chris's team and Richard's team, we've gone around all campus to take photos of all of the different types of styles of signage and pieces. And I think as we come up with making some recommendations about those pieces, we've come to this group and then the board. And then once those get formalized, then they would be rolled through the
Okay.
campus uniform.
So this may not be the final Jack Scott building signage.
It could be, I mean, it could be or it could not be based on your
Okay.
recommendations.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But we'll come up with some design standards. I think that would be helpful.
Yes. Because it looks so different from the Stratford Library and from the other noted
Mhm.
buildings on campus.
Okay, I think we're at upcoming measure PCC contracts.
Yeah, so.
Just, I know,
Right.
really quickly, my only question here
Of
is
course.
mirror pools.
Yes.
I know that it says here, sent to DSA. When are we expected to see the completion of the mirror pools?
It's like.
I'm not sure if, I don't know if Handels Mirror pulls us over the counter or not, but normally DSA, they have a bin time for those kind of projects, about 4 months for the smaller dollar amount projects. You don't have a lot of fire life safety in here, but I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It can be a 4-month process just sitting in
to get the
DSA.
approvals.
And then after approval, how long?
Normally you probably allow 3 months for bidding or more, but again, so that would take you out, and then mobilization of the contractor, which, I mean, for the mirror pools probably shouldn't take that much, unless there's fountain equipment that might be a long lead item, I'm not too sure, but normally it's about 3 months from, if you're gonna go the low bid route,
Yeah.
and then it's probably about a 3-month process for bidding or more.
But we can get you a more firm.
Yeah, I'm just, obviously,
We're
I'm
trying
asking this
to get
specifically because of
Around
our.
the centennial, we
Okay.
are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now, measure PCC contracts.
Yeah, so one of the, again, recommendations, from our board of trustees was to make sure, like, before something comes on the contract,
Yeah.
like, let's talk about that. So in our last meeting, we approved, the experienced teams to kind of help us with construction management projects and then our DSA inspection, and we have a group of vendors that, at that meeting, we also shared that, I shared that we were in the process of reviewing all the architectural firms. And so that process is completed, so you will see those contracts on this upcoming law.
Yes, and so I think that goes back to the point when we do the authorization of bids, and contracts, that these architecture firms certainly have some commitment to either DEI or, and as well as the contractors that we were using before those contracts that we had approved. And so that's why I wanted to, have this conversation now, so that moving forward, it's very clear, at least for me, as a board member, what we're looking at.
I think what we'll do is provide sort of similarly to what we did last time, to show you which ones were either women-owned, local, you know, of
Yes.
the awarded for the
Yeah.
architectural firms. We'll do that as well, make sure that you have that in advance of seeing it.
Okay, great, thank you.
But there are seven, and they are on the November 15th. So I'll make sure that we include that information for you as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We used to call that like maybe, weeby, DeVivi report, something like that.
Something.
I remember
Sleds.
minority,
Yes.
Oh,
women,
Local. Uh-huh.
DeVivi, vets, or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
not sure.
LD, something like that, yeah. It had the designation, so
Yeah, something
we'll
like
make sure that we include that so that you see
Remember
that
that.
as you're approving the item. You're welcome.
Alrighty, meeting schedule. When is the next one? I know she's done a fabulous job of scheduling us out till every project is done.
Oh, it doesn't have a document. It's usually I feel like it's the Wednesday before the meeting, Tuesday, it might be. Can we, I'll have,
Okay.
Audrey just email.
Yeah,
because we
so
do
I'm
have
just
a-
asking if you can make it, because we don't know when it is.
Yeah, I guess
We-
my question for this piece of it is I think maybe we should just set a monthly meeting time instead of doodling every month.
She might have,
Um,
but it might have
well,
gone
the
to the
question is,
previous
does it
members.
require-
Yeah,
a month?
so I think we need to,
Me,
I agree.
Well,
potentially, we can always cancel
I'm happy to work on a meeting if there's something
to discuss.
to discuss. I mean, we covered a lot today.
Yes, which is.
I'll
true.
tell you when there's gonna be something to discuss is when the refresh comes back on the master plan or the new strategic, whatever the new name for it is. And obviously, even after it comes back, I think we gotta give the administration and college time to digest and make recommendations.
I think the
And
way
then we're
that
gonna
we,
need a 2-hour meeting.
whatever you need.
I'm
The
saying,
way we bundle sort of the refresh process is we'll work in concert with HGA so that there's not this like, it doesn't have to be linear, so it's like they work and then they like we'll try to bundle as much to do some things in parallel with them so we're not, I don't wanna say wasting time, because all time is good time contributing, but that we're being strategic about how our facilities and construction services are providing feedback into that process, so that when it comes to you, at least those pieces have been, at least incorporated, and then you all can give
okay,
feedback.
so when there's something substantive, we're
Yes.
happy to get together. So obviously, so here we are on a Tuesday at, what time do we start this?
6
6
o'clock.
Is that in general a good time?
I would prefer like 5:30
Oh,
to
okay.
maybe, because I had a foundation meeting today.
Our
So I had
apologies.
an hour in between, so it's like, do I go home, do I go home? But I don't mind, because I look
That
busy.
sounds like a
No,
you,
we were worried about you hustling from hustling
Yeah.
to get here, so if 5:30 works and it's a better time, we're totally
Yeah,
comfortable with that.
So I'm guessing 5:30 Tuesdays work for you all?
Yeah.
And Wednesdays on non-board meeting Wednesdays, I would assume in general is a good time? Are
So
you,
that would
you
be
don't have classes on
Tuesday,
Tuesdays?
December 5th.
I mean, I think the Tuesday before is helpful because if anything needs to be agendized, that happens on the Wednesdays-ish, or the process begins, so if we need it, I think the Tuesday before the board meeting is better than the Wednesday before the board meeting, right?
Well, because the agenda, when do you guys, set the agenda?
I'm just conceptually,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
may be
yeah.
a fourth week of the, I'm just
Sure,
trying to
sure.
have tentative times, so when she sends out requests, she shoots for Tuesdays and
That generally
Wednesdays,
works.
as an example, as opposed to Mondays or
But setting it ahead of time is always helpful.
Sundays
Like
at 10 or
weeks, a
something.
couple weeks ahead of time is always helpful.
Proposed future agenda items.
I think we touched on this a little bit here, or just now, but I think having a sense of what whatever word we're using, refresh or supplement or addendum, of the facility strategic plan will be maybe a future item that we did at our next meeting is about like, what does that look like in terms of the timeline?
Mhm.
And then, what will that, because, you know, someone was, I mean, actually, they both were, but I wasn't here for
Yeah, yeah,
the last process, so a sense of what that timeline looked like,
Sure.
you know, how that process will go. Obviously, it's not gonna be the same as kind of the
correct.
full thing, but,
We're meeting with them just to re-engage on November 9th. So we have
Okay.
a meeting with them on the 9th to then give us better feedback about what they envision that timeline and process to be. So I think that December meeting would be great feedback for us to give you all.
I like the way that this meeting is agendized, in terms of the updates, and also the upcoming contracts. I know we didn't get a copy of them or a list of them, but if that could be included, that would be
Sure, sure.
Alrighty, is there a motion to?
motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 great, thank you.
We
Great
are
job,
done.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jones?